Darcy Steinke's career has been defined by a refusal to settle for easy answers on sexuality, faith, and being. In her novels, Sister Goldenhair, Milk, Jesus Saves, Suicide Blonde, and Up Through the Water, and her memoir, she's fearlessly examined and aggressively sought to fill in areas of our experience, both singular and collective, that have been ignored. In Flash Count Diary, Menopause and the Vindication of Natural Life, she continues and deeply expands this legacy. Where did I go? Sorry. Throughout her, by examining her own personal experience, her in-depth historical research, and her studies in the natural world, they all entangle and build to fill the void of stories around menopause. It is a harrowing journey, I will not lie, but also, perhaps, she offers a route for deliverance and a new kind of freedom. It's always such a pleasure to have our great friend, professor, essayist, and novelist Maude Casey in the store with us. In her books, including The Man Who Walked Away and last year's nonfiction, The Art of Mystery, Maude, she too claws away at what we take for granted, looking for what's underneath, what's untold. We're very fortunate tonight, too, that Maude will be reading from her forthcoming book, The City of Incurable Women. Please help me welcome Darcy Steinke and Maude Casey.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's always a delight to be here, and it's an extra special, supersonic treat to be with Darcy. And despite my protest, she's asked that I read first, and then she will read, and then we're going to discuss. And as Liz mentioned, I'm going to be reading from my forthcoming book, The City of Incurable Women, and I'm just going to read a short bit. It'll take just a little bit to set it up, but I think you'll begin to understand with my introduction the resonances between our books. So the book is a collaborative book of short stories and photographs that draws its inspiration from the Iconographie photographique de la Salpêtrière, pardon my French, my badly pronounced French, which is a 3-volume medical reference book produced by the students of the neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this history. The book grew largely out of Charcot's work with the patients he diagnosed as hysterics and was meant to provide forensic evidence of the disease, kind of objective documentation in the form of drawings and photographs. And the drawings and photographs suggest that illness and deviance is written on the female body, and that female psychiatric diagnoses in particular are purely physiological and not influenced by culture and nation and politics and history. And this was a moment in the early days of photography when it was being used as a forensic tool, not only for women, but for criminals and for Black and brown bodies in an era when race had long since been invented and was being sold. So the book is a series of stories and a range of images that include reproductions from the iconography and then original photographs by my collaborator Laura Larson. And the stories are partly inspired by historical figures, many of whom include Charcot's kind of most famous hysterics, including Augustine and Geneviève Legrand and Blanche Whitman, and also Jane Avril, who was a dancer and, as you may know, the subject of Toulouse-Lautrec's paintings, who spent some time in the Salpêtrière and wrote a memoir of her time there. There's another sequence of stories, or a sequence of stories woven into the mix that's narrated from a collective point of view, and that's the section that I'm reading from is from that point of view. And this "we" is meant to include the remaining women at the Salpêtrière, those who were in the general population and who weren't invited into Charcot's amphitheater for a lot of different reasons, because they weren't deemed beautiful enough or charming enough or theatrical enough or enough. And these women remained anonymous. So this section is from the very beginning, and it's called The City Itself. The city is in many ways like other cities. Like other cities, it was built alongside a river and has a series of low, rambling buildings, at the center of which is the domed chapel of a cruciform church. In the chapel, Chapelle St. Louis, the great doctor will one day lie in state. We will be invited to pass through, to look upon his dead face. Those of us who can't walk will be brought on stretchers. From a stretcher, it will be harder to see, but they will tell us that to see his face is not the point, though we will have had enough of the point by then, because we have had enough of the point already. Not pointed at all, but dull and dusty, left somewhere on the side of the road as we were walking to where who can even remember. Still, who wouldn't look? We will look as he looked, seeking out the disease. Did you leave this world gently? We want to ask him. This was our mother's and father's wish until it wasn't, because they could not find gentleness in the world, and so why would leaving be any different? Anyway, who leaves this world gently? We will look the way we all look when studying a face who has studied us. Who are you? Who am I? Where are we going? What is this feeling? Why? What does it all mean? Etc. The great doctor's last words, I am feeling a little better. How about now? As in other cities, there are alleys with pollarded plane trees, which, if you know the way, will take you the back route to the market, the bakery, the laundry, the vegetable gardens, the school where we learn grammar, history, geography, and sums, the gymnasium where we learn to bend and not to break, the library where those of us who are able to read borrow books about other cities, the post office where those of us who know how to write consider posting letters, the rest of us trace our names in the dark on each other's backs, into the skin, into the blood. We take an alley back route to the cemetery where sometimes we go to visit ourselves. In other words, as in other cities, there are places to live and places to die. In the city, we are dimly aware of the other cities, the villages, the farms where we were born or we found ourselves, places we left behind as this city wrapped itself around us like time. The places from the before fade, grow fainter, farther away, until it is too far to travel even in our minds. For example, the city that contains our city, the one outside the wrought iron gates. We can't be sure we didn't make it up altogether. The city is, in other ways, unlike other cities. In the courtyard, sometimes there are masked balls where famous scientists and artists and doctors dress as robed monks, musketeers, knights in armor. On those nights, the great pavilion is strung with fairy lamps, colored lanterns, flowers, and streamers, and we dance as though we are Jane Avril at the Moulin Rouge. And then look, there is Jane Avril. No, really, there she is, the citizen of the city, too, for a brief while. The luxurious pain of a body in the throes of its symptoms has been likened to a dance, and when this dancer was a body in pain, it was something to behold. Unlike other cities, there's a photography annex with platforms that fill an entire studio, platforms along whose length we walk because the way we walk is worth capturing and inscribing on plates of glass. There are headrests for close range, large-scale photographs of our head, iron gallows to suspend those of us who can't walk or hold ourselves upright, those of us who will eventually be carried on stretchers and told it is not the point to see the great doctor's dead face when he lies in state, at which point we will wonder, as we sometimes do when we are poked or pinched by some suspension apparatus, why does everything have to be so pointed? The city, like other cities, has a history. As with other cities, its history is contained in its name, Salpêtrière. In Latin, salpetre, salt of stone, saltpeter, sparkling white crystals that grow on stone walls and hardened soil and other damp, dark places, trash pits, dovecotes, hen houses, barnyards, cellars, crypts. Sparkling white crystals which, when mixed with other things, are an essential ingredient for gunpowder. In the before, we were daughters of all sorts of people who themselves were the sons and daughters of all sorts of people, and so on. We were the granddaughter of a peterman, whose job it was to scrape off, dig out, unearth the white salt crystals wherever he found them, ripping up privies and the floors of houses. When demand was high, grandfather collected piss, which when filtered yields the same sparkling white crystals as clings to stone. Why not? Our bodies as damp, as dark as any other damp, dark place, damper, darker. Our grandfather, the Peterman, tells a story of the alchemist in ancient China looking for a cure to mortality. None of us, he tells us, is foolish enough to want to ward death off forever. Only an emperor would ask for the cure. His gilded life, why wouldn't he? Fix it, this emperor said to the alchemist, who, having dealt with emperors before, got immediately to work. He ground sulfur into a fine powder, added honey, waited as long as he dared to be inspired. Finally, one night, as he walked through the graveyard, there on the gravestones, the white crystal sparkling. When he heated the mixture with the sulfur and the honey, sure enough, flames and a cloud of smoke. Even if it failed to cure the emperor's mortality, the pyrotechnics would impress him. Anyway, if it failed to cure his mortality, he would be dead. The fire drug, the alchemist called it, and it became famous. Impervious to the roughest handling, it slowed the decomposition of the hulls of the ships that carried it from China to India to the Middle East, and eventually to Europe, where it began its career as gunpowder, the engine of empire. Bengal, saltpeter, one of the reasons Napoleon was keen to wrest India from the English. Enough, enough, we say to our grandfather. We've grown tired of his lectures about the history of saltpeter. The truth is, we've grown tired of lectures. Grandfather's last words? Pass the salt. Of course those weren't his last words. There are some things whose value increases for having never been recorded, by virtue of being kept private. Privacy makes history around here. Privacy, like history, is something worth imagining.
So good. I love that. And the book is amazing. She sent me a kind of a little thing of the book with the pictures. Oh, it's so good. I'm so excited. Actually, I was trying to think. I think we've known each other since you were 15. Because her father was my teacher at the University of Virginia.
And then our lives became incredibly entangled in lots of different ways.
Yes, I know. Yes, so many ways, right? But it's such a blessing, such a gift. I don't know. I just love Maude Casey. I love me some Maude Casey. All right, so I see so many friends and family. I just can't believe it. I'm just thrilled out of my mind. Okay, so this is so fantastic. All right, so I'm going to read from my book. Actually, first I'm going to set it up a little bit. I'm going to set up, and then we're going to read, kind of going into the. So my book, Flesh Count Diary. It's what happened is I woke up in the middle of the night, maybe about 5 years ago, completely drenched in sweat, kind of raised up, and I thought to myself, because I'm a minister's daughter, I thought to myself, God is finally trying to contact me. You know what I mean? Finally, he's trying to make contact. But that really wasn't what was happening. What was happening was that I was having my first hot flash. But it was oddly exquisite. You know, you hear people talk about hot flashes, but it was terrible, but it was also sort of spooky and sort of otherworldly and kind of exquisite as well. And there were the symptoms kept coming. There was insomnia. There was a sense of disorientation, definitely also some feelings of gender transformation. It was all happening. I found myself wandering around my house in the middle of the night, I was molting, kind of. It was a really strange feeling. I felt like a new, very cool, but more androgynous creature was coming out of my more feminine self, my former feminine self. So it was just a big transformation to me, very disorienting, more disorienting than I ever thought it was going to be. Because, I didn't know very much about it, which is why I actually wrote the book. And B, all people, I was oh, I do yoga, I drink a lot of soy milk. It's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to go through menopause. Which of course is wrong, because we have to, we humans are animals. We have to go through all the life stages. So I was reeling around. I was trying to read books. I was trying to read everything as a writer. I always try to find books and novels that will sort of help me. I can't really understand anything unless I read about it somehow, in a novel form or a book form. But I found very little that was actually satisfying. There was a few medical books that were okay. There was a lot of celebrity, hormone screeds, for instance, Suzanne Summers' The Sexy Years, which I found completely unhelpful. So I found myself really lonely and I just couldn't really find books or even role models for this time of life. My mom hadn't talked to me about it. Actually, nobody was talking about it. So during this time of disorientation, I read this. I love, my favorite part of the New York Times is the Science Times that comes on Tuesday. And there was a little article in there about how the two creatures that go through menopause are human women and female killer whales. So that I thought was completely fascinating. So I immediately went and read the article. The little article came from an actual a paper that was in the journal Nature, and I read that like completely. And as it turned out, the killer whales, through studying the southern resident killer whales who live in the Salish Sea around the San Juan Islands in Washington State, scientists have found out that not only do like killer whales go through menopause, but like at around 45 or 50, they become so powerful that they actually start to, as their post-reproductive life, they start to be the leaders of their pods as well. So they don't just like go into menopause, they also become the leaders of their pods. And pods are these very close-knit family groups of maybe 20 to 40 whales. And in the San Juan Islands, there's the K, J, and L pod. There are 3 pods out there. So this idea I really liked, you know what I mean? So, and then the article went on to talk about why humans go through menopause. It sort of said, we probably go through menopause for similar reasons. Like at around 45 or 50, we become so smart and knowledgeable that we're more valuable as grandmothers, but also leaders of our community than we are. It's like we're just, we get taken out of the, I'm not against mothers and motherhood and babies, but we get taken out of that world into a world of, a slightly elevated world, of leadership. So that is why menopause was selected. And it's been a big sort of evolutionary puzzle why menopause was selected, because according to fitness, which is like Darwinian fitness, which is having children until the very end of your life, that's what most creatures do. Scientists could never understand why like menopause existed, because it makes no sense in a way, right? But now we know that it's because menopause was selected both in whales and humans. So women at around 50 could have greater leadership skills in their community. So this idea was one I really latched onto. I thought it was a great idea. So I started to get completely obsessed with the whales. I started to watch them on YouTube. And luckily for me, the southern residents, there's lots of footage of them. They've been studied for like 30 years. Like I think since the 70s, people have been taking videos of them. And there's also lots of whale watching footage of them. And so I would watch them spy hop and jump and then I also started to listen to, there's this thing called the in Harrow Strait, like on the San Juan Islands, so there's a hydrophone that you can live link to your computer. So I would listen to it on my computer all the time. I only heard them about 3 or 4 times. Like I mostly just heard boat motors, but it was cool because I learned like what like shrimp sounded like, you know what I mean? Like I learned, like someone said to me, that's a mackerel. I'm like, wow, it's a mackerel. Who would have known like the different fish in the water have different sounds? But so I got completely obsessed. And I specifically got obsessed with this whale called Granny, known as J2. She was the leader of the J pod, and she's 104 years old. Whales are known by their dorsal fins. They can be identified, and actually Granny's dorsal fin is very specific. It's a big, huge, probably 4 or 5 feet, and then it has a big notch. Probably from a run-in with the propeller at some point. So it's very unique. So you can see her very easily. I don't know. Whale people can see her very easily. So I got completely obsessed with her, and I just started to watch, footage of her, and I would print out pictures in my notebook. I was like a little girl. Like I got like obsessed with an animal. I did feel like a creature that was in like a folktale, like a little girl in a folktale. Like I got obsessed with the creature. So I got so obsessed that eventually I just was like, I have to try to see these whales. Like I need to see them. So I got in a plane, I flew to Seattle. I got in the van and went up the coast. I got to the ferry. I took a 2-hour ferry out to the San Juan Islands. And then I got in a sea kayak and tried to see the whale. So I'm going to read to you trying to see the whale. It's the whale watching part. Actually, I have my book. So if you hear me have a little stutter, it's just, I have a little stutter, but I'm not going to have a seizure or anything like that. It's just my stutter, and it's not a big deal. Actually, somehow, like if I tell you about it, I'll probably do it less. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So I went out with a group. There were 2 guides. The guides' names were Matt and I can't remember the other one. Actually, but you'll see they'll be mentioned in here. But it was a group of about 6 people. After lunch, we load back into the kayaks. The wind is less severe now. The water placid, smooth. As we clear the bay mouth and move out into the Salish Sea, the guy with the humpback tattoo says he thinks he sees whales to the west. I see them, small black and white shapes, breaching and spy hopping. Matt has us raft up, pull the kayaks close together. I grip my neighbor's paddle. Will holds on to the bull kelp rooted in the sea floor so we don't drift. Matt says if there were more time, he'd tuck us into a nearby cove. The whales are moving fast, making their serpentine way in and out of the water. Their dorsal fins are bigger than I imagined, towering over the sea. Massive heads push giant pillows of rippled water in front of them. Each time they rise, breaking the surface, the sea streams off their backs like rainwater sheeting off a tilted roof. The theater lady is worried. She was one of the people in the group. They are swimming directly at us. Could we capsize? Matt reminds us to hold each other's paddles tight. I feel the kayak rise up a little in the water, because it was displaced. So they were, it was like, ugh. As the whales swim closer, talking stops. The concentration is acute, singular. I feel my pulse speed up, my heart shaking my rib cage. 2 whales surface 10 feet in front of the kayak, their eye patches so white they glow, and their dorsal fins stretching high in the air. Ka-woof! Their blowholes go off one after another. The kayaks jumble together on the confused sea. I am a small land creature floating on the edge of a vast ocean populated by giants. When I look down, I see several whales swimming beneath our boats, white tummies moving under translucent green water. Our kayak rises up, and in front of me, only a few feet away, is a massive killer whale. Ka-woof! I see a brown eye looking directly at me, the shining, numinous, expansive body. It's Granny, Matt says. I see the notch. So I saw Granny. Okay, wow. In the van on the way back, silence continues. I feel blissed out, sleepy. When I get back to my hotel room, I call up people on the East Coast to tell them I've seen Granny. I feel a strong need to share, but each time I tell the story of the huge black and white creatures surrounding our raft of yellow kayaks, I feel, after I put down the phone, a sense of loss, of somehow selling out the experience, making the encounters sound like yet another entertainment. When I describe the whales as vibrant, muscular, huge, the whales become visual objects separate from myself. But what I actually felt was a kind of dilation. I'll later learn what I've experienced is known by local boat captains and naturalists as an orcagasm. When the whales surface, people first get quiet, one guide tells me. Then they make sex sounds, heavy breathing, ahs, oohs, and oh my God. Seeing whales is not passive, but it's an embodied experience. When the whale breaches, one park ranger told a researcher, it's like a climax. People don't get this way about foxes. I have trouble falling asleep that night. There is the usual menopausal sleeplessness. It is stuffy. My room has no air conditioning to combat Washington State's rare heat wave, and I can hear music coming out of herbs across the street. Whenever anyone leaves or enters, noise flares out. Mostly I'm still high off seeing Granny. J2 is a wholly mythological beast, one who gave off a powerful charge. This was not a warm, fuzzy feeling. One does not meet oneself, the naturalist Lauren Isley has written, until one catches the reflection from an eye other than human. Granny's eye was watchful, removed, judicious, and very uneasy. The animal looks at us, Derrida writes, and we are naked before it. Thinking perhaps begins there. For years, I've been reading The Transcendentalists, those lovable Victorian hippies. I've read Emerson's essay, Nature, slowly, stopping to meditate on favorite passages. Nature will bear the closest inspection. She invites us to lay our eye level with her smallest leaf and take an insect view of its plane. I wanted, as the Transcendentalist had, to feel the divine in nature. Nature, Thoreau writes, is full of genius, full of the divinity, so that not a snowflake escapes its fashioning hand. Now I realize that nature was not full of divinity, that the Transcendentalists had not gone far enough. Nature itself was divinity. Galway Connell writes, if the things and creatures that live on earth don't possess mystery, there isn't any. As a minister's daughter, I've always thought a lot about the spiritual realm. I'm continually reading books on the roots of Christianity, Sufi cults, and Buddhist masters. I make retreats to monasteries and listen to theological podcasts. None of this makes me spiritually smarter. Actually, I'm sort of dense when it comes to religion. Faith is not natural to me. Confronted by the whale, much of my theology seems speculative, even flimsy. I want both the more that William James writes about, but also the real that J2 engenders. When I wake later, the music has stopped. I look out my window at the textured glass shade of the streetlight, the bright edge of a building, one window's inky shine. I know I should sleep, but my new position in the universe is making my brain feel as if it's on fire, and not because of hormonal withdrawal. I don't want time to keep going forward, separating me from the whales and Granny. I felt a little as I had the night after my daughter was born. After pushing out a creature wet with salt water and blood, I felt at life's oceanic center. Every minute moving forward separated me from an experience too big to absorb. It was a real thing, though it could not be represented as value, but only, as the philosopher Jean-Luc Morin explained, as the impossible, like birth, death, Eros, and God. Seeing J2 was like having my daughter, an event outside human evaluation. I'm just going to read a couple more passages. The Leviathan, the whale, above all other creatures, is a stand-in for God, a placeholder. Ahab loses his life in trying to control the white whale. After Jonah refuses to obey divine instruction, God sends the whale to swallow him. The verbs used to connote God's relationship with the whale vary according to biblical translation. On BibleGateway.com, I consider the various versions. In the English Standard, God appointed the whale, as if God were like an upper-level manager moving his creature to a new post. In the International Version, God provided the whale. God is the ultimate prop master. The Lord prepared the whale in the King James Version. God is film director working with a difficult method actor. Prepared is clearest. God trains his divine emissary to do his bidding. Still, the accuracy is off. God and whale are not separate, but one. I offer my own crude translation. God, the whale, swallowed me. Back in Brooklyn after my trip, I have a dream that I'm sitting in a cavernous room, writing at a small desk like the IKEA one I use upstate. Far above my head in a corner, I see books, volumes lined up according to subject. I am in a library. My desk shifts, the legs sinking into plush pink carpet. I scribble words on a legal pad. After a while, I look up again. I see the line of emaciated stone saints. I am in a cathedral, not a library. I write some more. It's the third time I look up that I see the gigantic, rounded rib bones, and above my head, the long and elegant spine. Thank you. Good. All right. Yay. Do you mind if we stand? Because I'm having a back thing. Is it all right with you?
We're going to do a duet.
Yeah, I know. We're going like, I just can't. I'm a little bit. Actually, are they on? Okay. All right, good. All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Of
first?
course. Yeah, please.
There's so many things I want to ask you,
Okay.
and I think maybe the best way is to kind of start with a broad view.
Okay.
And the passage you read, there's so much in the book that is so smart and meditative about kind of being in a human animal body,
Right.
and kind of coming to terms with that. So there's this real sort of seeking to understand what it is to be in a body,
Right,
but then
right.
also this transcendence and this kind of
yeah.
way in which the book sort of unravels the knot of certainty
Right.
about
I think that's very,
about
very,
kind
very
of
beautiful reading. Beautiful reading.
Well, thank
yeah.
you.
I like it a lot. Yeah. Keep going. That's good. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so there's this really lovely juxtaposition of kind of seeking knowledge, but then unraveling knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm a big believer that we write books, but then the books write us.
Yeah.
And
This was so true of this one. Yeah.
Because you
yeah.
began this book, I mean, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, but you began this book kind of seeking. I mean, it was sort of like you were keeping a journal
Yeah. Exactly.
of
my hot
God's
flashes.
visitation, which turned out to be your hot flash.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then 3 years later,
Yeah.
here we are.
I know.
And I mean, I know it's hard to
Yeah.
qualify these things, but
Right.
is there a sense? Could you begin to even
Yeah.
characterize what?
Well, yeah. I mean, I really
what
do
that
think that
journey
I
is.
mean, this was this most weirdest book I ever wrote, in that I usually, I'm a novelist, so it usually takes me a long time to write a novel. It might take me 4 or 5 years, and I have periods where I write like a bunch of stuff I have to throw away, and it's like a long process of. But this one, basically, I mean, I was working on a novel, the same novel I've been trying to write for 10 years off and on, but it just never works. But and then that's when I found out about the whales. And then I just got more and more and more obsessed. And I just realized that, like, I should, I think it's always smart to like align your creative life with your obsession.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and my novel was my obsession too, but it was like a back burner obsession. You know what I mean? But this was like the front burner obsession. And I remember, my husband's here, and I remember, actually, like, part of the process of deciding to write the book was I'd had a really bad night's sleep, and he came over and just like very gently said, like, when you go away from the whales, you don't do so well, but when you stay with the whales, you do really well, like. And so I was like, okay, well, that seems really an amazing thing for your husband to say to you, right? But that is part of the thing where I was like, okay, I need to go into this more deeply, you know what I mean? I need to just like really just accept that I'm obsessed with the whales and see where like it brings me. And I did kind of want to write about the hot flashes and menopause. I don't know if I would have wanted to write a menopause book without the whales. You know what I mean? Because I just don't know how I would have done it. Like I kind of needed the whales and whale menopause to like pull me through the book. But it's true that the book itself became, in a way, like, I mean, there's no answer to menopause because it's not a problem, but the book became the exploration of menopause that helped me then move through it, for sure. Like, yeah.
Well, I was thinking, I mean, just that idea of sort of menopause not being a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I mean, it's not a disease.
It's not a disease.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's not a disease, yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about the...
It's not.
It's not.
I mean, I just feel I really feel
Um,
angry that, like, no one tries to shut down menstruation. No one tries to shut down birth. The only like female life phase they try to shut down is menopause. It's craziness. I mean, it's misogyny. I mean, it's just like boilerplate misogyny,
Well, I was thinking,
Yeah.
and I actually have to look at my little notes here because now I've forgotten what... I was thinking about vindication in the title, and its many... it's got a couple of different meanings.
Well, I chose it because of the Mary Wollstonecraft.
Well, I was going to say
the vindication of women's
it
rights.
seemed,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
so it harkens back to that 18th century philosophical treatise by Mary Wollstonecraft about the education of women.
Exactly.
But it also the vindication itself, free from blame, justified,
Right,
defend,
good point,
and so
good
it's like
point,
this
yeah.
freeing,
Right,
and
right.
so you evoke. I mean, one of the things that the book does is put all of these different voices in conversation. So there's Mary Wollstonecraft kind of haunting the book, but then
so many
you've got
books,
William James and Ovid and Aristophanes and Belinda Carlisle talking about putting a magnet in her underpants.
She swears. She swears by it. She swears that it works for hot flashes. I don't know.
And I wonder if when you got to the other side of the book, now that the book is out, how you. Well, I'm interested in sort of the process of collecting those voices.
It was. I always used to wonder, like the book I wrote, like I always used to wonder, like, how do people write these essays with these quotes and the way, and I never could figure out like how to, because I have a very discursive brain. Like I always have like 5 ideas and they're kind of parallel and like, so I feel like only recently we have all this beautiful sort of avant-garde work. I feel like actually it's more in pieces, it's more broken up, and I actually would say, I mean, I don't know, like you don't want to get in the male-female thing, but I would argue that there is a sense that there's a sort of female sensibility to it sometimes. So this like discursive way of having an idea and then not having to exactly connect it to the next idea, but then having the next idea there, and they can kind of build in a way and be in relationship with each other and haunt each other. But the way I did the book is I probably read about 500 books to do the book, and then I had about 50 notebooks where I would just take extensive notes. And then I would write like notes of my notes, and I would write like notes of my notes of my notes, and I would write notes of my notes of my notes of my notes, and I would get to like about 10 pages, and then I would just go. I would just like try. I would be like, what do I have to say, and how can these things fit? So I would I would read for about a month before every chapter, just read, and then take notes. Yeah. It was very exciting though. It was kind of scary. Like almost every month, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Like I'm not gonna be able to write about insomnia. But then I would find a book about like a cultural study of night. Yeah. I'd be like, oh my God, this book is so good. And like it fits in with my own like insomnia and then I would start to get excited and like, but I never thought, I mean, I always felt a lot of energy as I wrote the book, but each time I got to a chapter, I thought to myself, what do I have to say about this? But then it always turned out that I did have something to say. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I don't know. But I think these voices helped. Yeah. I mean, the fact I had these notes helped me both like organize my own ideas around them, and then also help because I had my own personal experience. I had these ideas that were sort of bolstering me up, and I could add. So it was very helpful for me. It was like being less lonely. Yeah. When you write a book, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I also think, when you were saying, the idea of fragmented books, that form. I bet that you've read this essay, this Lydia Davis essay, Form as a Response to Doubt. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, one of the things about that essay, she talks about fragments as a way of kind of formalizing a sort of questioning. So that there's pieces that suggest a larger whole, but it also kind of embodies in makes so much sense itself, to me. This kind of, I have questions. Yeah, and, there are gaps and uncertainty.
It's like, because people think of essays as like persuasive writing, which I'm not against either. But like, there's also the idea of essay is to try. Like it means to try, right? So like, it's the idea of you just keep trying, you kind of fail, but then you try again, and you kind of fail. Like, and you keep trying to get at something. I mean, to me, those are the essays that I like the most, like the essay you're talking about. And that's what I wanted my book to be more like. I kept trying, kept trying to kind of get at some ideas about menopause. But not conclusions, but just keep trying.
Yeah, well, and it raises kind of wonderful, wonderful questions. Yeah. And I mean, that whole idea of, there is you're kind of setting in motion a lot of questions, a lot of, you're sort of pointing to a lot of mysteries.
Yeah, right.
Something dear to my heart. And you point to the sort of the mysterious nature of menopause, that there aren't, that science has struggled with it and been baffled by it. Yeah, so but there's also like just the sort of mysterious nature of what is womanhood? Yeah. Like, what is it to be a woman?
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
No one knows what a woman is, which is great. I mean, really, but no one knows. I mean, which is why we need every kind of woman over here, because no one knows. It's like except all women, because who knows what a woman is? Yeah. I want to ask you a question about your like hysteric book. Like I think as long as I've known you, not when you were 15, but you've been obsessed with this like for a long time, right?
Yeah, no, I'm interested in the hysterics. I like the hysterics. I like a mind that is not running on conventional rails.
Yeah. But I loved what you told me, because we've talked about them before, and I love the piece you read, but I love the idea that they were like, they were like famous hysterics that were like rock stars, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, I mean, one of the things that really struck me about, once I started kind of going, I mean, I went down the rabbit hole a while ago, but I mean, just the way that even as the women who were being, and girls really, I mean, 15, you know, Augustine was 15 when she was, and she hadn't even gotten her period.
Yeah,
yet.
right.
You know, when she was being asked to kind of perform at Charcot's Tuesday lessons, which was sort of a public spectacle of, you know, he would kind of put her through her paces.
Like a performance of hysterical.
Yeah.
Like hysteria.
Of hysteria.
Wow.
And sort of a case study of hysteria.
Amazing.
And all the women who were subject to these performances knew the different stages and kind of had been taught the different stages.
Yeah, right.
But they also had they had some agency in there because it was unscripted.
Yeah,
so I don't know if it was Augustine. It was one of the hysterics in the woman diagnosed with hysteria.
Right.
In that scene, at one point turns to Charcot and says, "Get rid of that snake in your pants." I mean, and you just think, wow,
That's amazing.
there's like some power.
That's a good
in
riff.
here.
Yeah,
There's
that's
like
a
a
good
little bit of
riffing.
agency. In
Yeah,
there. I mean,
that's a good
they're
riffing,
they're
yeah.
held captive, but within that structure, they push
Yeah,
back.
no, I like that.
So-
I mean, I was thinking too about, you know, one of the things that, as I've like worked on the book, that's really like frustrated me is this. I mean, I sort of call it the kind of crazy menopausal like woman syndrome. Like people want to say menopausal women are crazy, and you see it all over the place. I mean, there was just like recently, all over my Facebook, there was this like. I mean, I'm sure she's in neuroscience, but she did not speak like doctors that I spoke to for my book, you know. And she has a book coming out in 2020, and she wants to link the start of Alzheimer's with menopause, which is just basically fear mongering, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she had all these things in here about how, like, you know, what a hormonal joy, you know, puberty was, but then menopause was a crisis and a tragedy, and that's when Alzheimer's, and it's like she doesn't know that, you know what I mean? Like, and it just made me crazy. Like, it just seemed like another excuse. And then there was like Lisa Miller in like New York Magazine. There was this whole article about these women who were really suffering. They were healing, menopause. They were hearing voices. Somehow maybe they were denied hormones, but they needed hormones and all that stuff. And there was like a sense they could be schizophrenic. At the end of the article, you find out this is like a condition that affects 1% of the population. I'm just like, wow. This entire 4,000 word article was just to go into the crazy lady, like menopausal lady syndrome. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Talk about you know what I mean? Like, and I feel so frustrated with that. Like that, I feel like it's so easy to slip into that. And I just feel so frustrated by it. Like, I see it everywhere, and I just wish we could do more to just stop it, you know? Yeah.
Well, the last little paragraph in the piece that I read, you know, I have been thinking a lot about privacy, and privacy versus diagnosis, and I think this really applies to your book, and you're thinking about sort of the way that menopause is both diagnosed, considered, you know, treated as a disease,
right,
something to overcome,
right,
and also, you know, there are these kind of symptoms that are kind of
there seemed
disseminated in the world for all of us to latch onto.
Yeah, I know.
And then there's the private experience,
good point.
which is you know as individual as
totally
any, you know,
everyone. I
inimitable.
mean, everyone's hot flash is different. Everyone's insomnia is different. Everyone's like, you know.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like, you know, I just feel so frustrated. Like, no, I mean, my first experience like seeing someone in menopause was probably Edith Bunker. You know, you know what I mean, where she would get all hot, and then like Archie would say something mean to her, and then she would run into the kitchen, and the laugh track would go crazy, right? Yeah. And like that just, I just feel. Yeah. I mean, you know, nobody laughs at people that are having seizures. You know what I mean? It just makes me so angry. You know, I just feel, I don't know. But I needed my rage to write my book, so that also was. I think it's, you know, it wasn't just like the menopausal. I really got mad, you know, and that helped me, you know.
Well, there was a wonderful piece in the New Yorker.
There really was
recently
a really good thing in the New
by
Yorker.
Sarah Mangusa.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
About Darcy's book, and
I
one
feel
of the
so
things she
grateful.
said, speaking
Yeah.
of her age, was, you'll help me if I get this wrong, but she said, we need. It's like we believe in anger if it has a reason.
Yeah.
But what if anger is physiologically based?
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
I mean that was a really interesting thing.
I know.
About.
Yeah. Well,
So.
you know what? I wrote a chapter about anger, and it got. I think it was in. I don't know where it was, but it was like. I think it was. I don't know if it was BuzzFeed or Slate. So like, it went around Twitter and all that stuff. But a lot of women were saying it was interesting because they were saying their anger had been like perimenopausal rage, but they were really happy that they felt like I was like validating, like you have a right to be angry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like your life may be not perfect. I always tell my daughter that like, people talk about PMS, but I mean, that's a period where your hormones lift, and there can be an incredible like lucidity and vulnerability then that's quite beautiful. It's not just like you're a bitch. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you actually are you're in like a different sort of physiological and like philosophical state because of your hormones. But it's not something to make fun of, and to debase, It's like, again, just like debasing the female life cycle. It's just like, okay. Yeah, sorry.
I want to return to the whales for a bit and actually kind of link it to another moment that I particularly love that I've mentioned to you. There's a scene in the book where you describe going swimming.
Oh yeah,
and you're swimming, and I can let you tell more about it. But there's a sense, there's a quote you have in there by Fanny Howe that's about sort of relationality.
Yeah.
Am I getting this right?
Yeah,
I mean, but
it's a fish.
I wonder if you might talk a little bit about sort of, I know you said that Mike had said the whales. The whales are where it's at.
Yeah.
But that sense of kind of being a part of this larger picture, could you say a little bit more about that?
Okay, well that's very much like Maude, the like mystic, just asked that question. Okay, all right, let's see. Can Darcy the mystic respond? Let's see, can she? Okay, let's see. Yes, I think that was the book. I mean, the beautiful thing about the book is I really did feel like an animal. Like I got to know a lot of animals through the book, not just the whales, but also I went to visit like Ambika here at the National Zoo. I visited her. Colo, the gorilla. I went to visit some horses. I studied all these female animals in middle age. But and not just that, I just started to feel more like an animal, so I felt like more connected to other animals, but also in a weird way connected to other human animals and also connected to the earth. And then swimming, which I've always loved to do in the summer, I swim across this lake. I don't know, it was a really amazing experience to like write the book, because I think I did move from a more doctrinaire idea of religion and into a more like idea that the earth itself and the creatures like in the world itself, that's really where I should be looking and concentrating and trying to see the world more deeply and more clearly. Like that was my
that's actually a sort of really beautiful answer to sort of how the book wrote you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the book changed.
Yeah,
you,
I mean, this is the thing is where I just want to say one more thing and then okay. But then this year, because I'm very proud of this, because I live near Prospect Park and I walk there all the time, and it's a beautiful park. The Frederick Law, like Olmsted, like designed it so beautiful. But just this year, for the first time, I've been able to notice the fledgling birds. Like I can see, because they're a little bit different than the adults. I mean, they look like adults, but they're like a little more. But I've like been able to like notice them, and like things like if you see a sparrow like feed another sparrow and they look like adults, the one he's feeding is the fledgling, and the robin is a little speckled. So that really made me happy. Like I just felt like wow, like I'm getting to be. It seemed like spiritual progress, Weirdly, it just did,
No,
all right.
It totally does.
Sorry, okay, I just had to. Of course. Okay, so we'll answer any questions.
So
does anybody have any questions?
We'll open it up.
Phyllis? Yes. Phyllis, my friend from college. Woohoo!
So I teach writing,
Yes.
and I'm always interested in the ways we're using sources. And it feels so much in books like these where you're both working with medical facts and language, but also looking critically at medical facts and language. And so trying to imagine how I would describe, or how to describe that process of how do you, when you're working with that material and you're both at a distance from it, but also it's, sometimes it's going to be something you take as the truth, and sometimes it's something you're going to take as a critical perspective on.
Right.
And so the question is something in there about how do you move back and forth between those in order to decide I'm going to trust this or I'm not going to trust this.
I mean, I guess for me it was the subjective voice in it is the thing that I mean, I'm a novelist by training, and then so if I could find a way to like both when I'm writing about the things that are true, like have a subjective voice, but also have quotes. I also want to make sure the quote in some ways it's not my voice, but it's close enough to my voice. So just always having the filter of the subjectivity. I mean, I know I teach writing too, and I often feel like when the students, especially in stories, when they start to be not great, it's when the subjectivity has dropped out. There's not enough narration. Like there's not enough subjective. Like you don't feel centered in like a point of view, and so I always feel strongly whether I'm writing fiction or nonfiction that like the subjectivity of my point of view has to remain in there. It's like, yeah. Does anybody else? It's fine if you don't, but that's my husband. All right, I think we should just thank everyone, right? I don't know. Do we?
I think we should sing a duet.
What? I know, right?
I do feel like we're on the verge here.
No, I just want to thank Maude and thank you and thank the bookstore and thank Maude. I've always wanted. I think we did do this once when your first book came out. So now, right?
So this is
at Community Bookstore. So here we go. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
No, I love
All
it.
right.
I always love talking to you.
All right. So thanks for coming too. I really appreciate it. Thank you.